Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a video and podcast show that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Today, it is my privilege to welcome a professional turned artist, someone who's pursuing his passion, Ravi Trivedy. Ravi, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ashutosh. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Ravi is from the Sloan School of Business. He worked with the Technology Digital Equipment India. He worked in consulting with Ernst & Young, PwC, and KPMG, and then decided to quit and has now focused entirely on art, consulting, writing, reading, teaching, and tennis. So, Ravi, tell me, what would you say are three key milestones in your life or career?
A good point, Ashutosh. Actually, sometimes if you go back, if you read or if you hear the speech that was made by Steve Jobs, it's a fairly famous commencement speech that he made.
Yeah.
He says that you can't really look and plan your future looking ahead. Sometimes you have to look back and look at connecting the dots. So here's actually, I would say not three, but four milestones in my life.
Sure.
One was that I had an opportunity to start working in India after I finished my education here. But I managed to get a scholarship to join Rensselaer Polytechnic in the US to do a master's. And my dad was a little hesitant because he said, look, most people who go never come back and all this stuff. We're a tight family, so it was a bit of a touch and go thing. But I said, look, never will I get an opportunity to go and study somewhere, in the US, in a very good school, and on top of which get a scholarship, which was really a teaching assistantship plus a research assistantship.
Correct.
So it was like a milestone. You take a risk without really knowing what the future will look like. It's like a bend in the road, and you decide to take a path.
Correct.
In 1978, there were very few people who were really going off to the US at that time. There were people, obviously, but it was not a stream. And my dad was in the railways, so there was no way we could afford to do this. How government jobs were fantastic in facilities, but terrible as paymasters.
Absolutely.
But it gave me the independence at the age of 19 to be in the US on your own. I remember going to New York, landing in New York City, and not knowing anybody, and I had to go to the Port Authority terminal to take a bus to Albany to go to school. And I'll never forget, because you hear in those days, you heard stories about New York and how mugging used to happen and all that stuff. And I hid my $200 that I had got from the RN Setna scholarship fund in India to travel and to be able to survive for the first month. And I hid that money in my socks.
Okay.
But it was a massively fantastic journey, because being on your own, being independent, being in the US. 1978, 79, was just the time when Ronald Reagan was coming in.
Correct.
So I spent 10 years in the US. After I finished studying, I worked for digital equipment in the US as a semiconductor designer. And what I realized was that, you learn so much in that 19 to 27, 28 age bracket.
Correct.
Political views about how work should be done, work ethic. I love the Americans. They're not the most favorite people around the world, but they're when they work very sincerely and very diligently. And when they party, they party.
Absolutely.
The only people you would find on the weekends in the semiconductor facility that I was working in were Indians and Chinese. And the Americans used to say, you guys just don't understand how to enjoy life. So, that was one turn. In 1987, I decided, okay, I've spent, 10 years here. What do I want to do next? And I could have carried on. I was doing well. And I said, no, let me go back, because, parents are getting old and, family is everything. So I chucked it all up and came back home.
Okay.
And, 1987, India was not 1992, because that's when Narasimha Rao came in with his movement. I came in, bounced around. I joined a software company for 6 months, and I realized that was not my life. It just didn't give me any joy. So I quit, and my parents didn't say a thing, but they were a little worried, because, when you chuck up something in the US, and I had a green card, but I chucked it up and came back. And then I joined Hindutron, which was Digital's partner in India. And I met Mr. Praveen Gandhi, who then told me that he's been a mentor for me throughout my life. And he told me that, look, digital is trying to come back to India and, come to India and, why don't you join? So I spent about 9 months with them and transitioned to Digital India when they joined, when they came into India. And there I had a fantastic run because I did everything from sales, marketing. So you see, again, I took a risk which is completely unheard of. Nobody used to come back from the US.
Correct.
And that too to a completely uncertain future.
Correct.
But I also realized that I was on the cusp of technology. I was doing semiconductors in the US. I was one of the first customers of Palm, by the way. Palm used to have the first smartphone. And, with
I remember using Palm also.
Yeah, and it was beautiful. I used to love it.
Palm, Cyan, they were all the same.
That's right. Absolutely.
But Ravi, I want to move to your art piece, which is so interesting.
Yeah, so that was the second. Third is I moved from technology to consulting, which was a fairly natural sequential jump because, in the end, whether you're consulting in technology or you're consulting in business, it doesn't matter. But I could jump in. Within that also, I jumped to financial services, which is not my forte. And I remember making a presentation at the RBI when we helped set up the RTGS system for India. I was the project manager for that. And some of the bankers who were, all the CEOs were there. And I remember Dr. Nayak, who was the CEO of UTI Bank at that time, came to me and said, which bank have you worked for? And I didn't have the heart to tell him I've never worked in the banking industry.
Right.
So that, and then the biggest jump has to be get out of the rat race, get out of consulting, get out of all of that stuff. Leave a partnership is a tough thing to do, as you can imagine.
Right.
And then I decided I'll just follow my heart. So I went back to school did a year of training on ceramic technology. It's something that I've always wanted to do. I've always had a passion for it. My dad loves art, and so that's exactly how I pursued it, and set up my own studio. And now what I do is I do work, but most of the work that I do is I tie up with the NGOs. We just finished a successful run with Impact, which is IIM Ahmedabad, the alumni NGO, and they auction my art. Whatever money comes in goes directly to them for the initiative for girl child education.
And tell me, where is this auction? For all our viewers.
So it was on their website.
On Impact?
Yeah, it's IIMAPACT.
Yeah.
So it's still on. We raised, I think, about 17 lakhs already. And so, people ask, do you mind giving away your art? And I think, I don't need the money. But, if it gets me some good points on my good karma chart, why not?
Wonderful. So tell me, when you decided to move out of the so-called corporate world, you retired, to focus on art. What were your feelings like? You were giving up such a large, role as partner in these big firms. What was the journey like?
Well, it was interesting. So, there comes a point in your life, I think, where you realize that, okay, so you've been there, done it, seen it, done it all. You're financially comfortable. So then what's next? You can carry on with the rut, which is, okay, go meet clients and go do this and go do that and manage people and, or do something completely different. And, like I said, I've taken 4 risks in my life before. So what's the risk now? And the other point really is there comes a point where you realize, there's a very strong word in the English dictionary called enough.
Correct.
I have enough. I've had enough.
Yes.
And if you can really bear down on what that enough means, if you don't have an extravagant lifestyle, which I don't, I've lived in the same place for the past 30 years. So you then you say, all right, so what is it for? My daughter's, working with the bank, so she's comfortable. So I think part of the challenge really was, how do you do something different in your life, which, gives you a new challenge.
Very interesting. So, you mentioned that you went back and trained yourself in ceramic.
Yeah.
Do you focus in any other form of art also?
No, so I do. I do a variety of things. I do a little bit of painting. I do a little bit of sketching, etc. But the beauty of something like ceramics is that unlike stuff. So, for example, so when I started with ceramics, 99.9% of the people who do ceramics do pottery. And I said, it's not something that excites me. Sitting on the wheel doing this stuff every day. The second is that if you see the pottery that's made by the Japanese or by the Chinese, they're miles, they're years ahead, and they have a 5,000-year history of this stuff.
Correct.
So if you want to be different, you got to do something different. So I decided, not even decided, I used to love art. And, every time I used to go to New York, I used to love going to Museum of Modern Art, because that is just like a treasure trove of amazing ideas.
Correct.
So I said, okay, let me combine the two. And teacher who I was learning ceramic technology from, she said, look, it's an interesting choice, but I really can't help you because I've never seen anybody do this. And actually, if you check it out on the web, there are very few. There are people who will do sculpture. There are people who will do pottery. And then there is me, I guess. Okay. So in a way, it's a slightly unique space.
And for our listeners and viewers, how would you define the space that you are in?
Well, actually, it's very tough. If you can imagine a Salvador Dali painting and translate that to art, to a three-dimensional object, or a Max Ernst or a Marcel, Duchamp painting, and translate that into a three-dimensional object, that's somewhere where I am.
Okay.
But it's a combination. My sources of inspiration include.
You piqued my interest so much that I'm now going to look for a piece. We have a large collection at home of various art, and I must have Ravi Trivedy in my house now.
Yes, please do, because in this auction I've been, there are many people who've taken pieces from me, and they were quite surprised, because they said, look, we also always think that ceramics was all about pottery, and suddenly we have this interesting piece of art.
No, that sounds very good. So tell me, moving on, how is art from South Asia? And this is all kinds of art.
Of course.
Accepted all over the world. I now find that more and more Indians are collecting art.
Yeah, of course.
But are non-Indians collecting Indian art?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, if you see, there is a large set of Japanese collectors. In fact, the largest collection of contemporary Indian art, or I wouldn't say contemporary, I would say, the masters, Souza and Gaitonde and
Ravi
Sundaram, and all of these people. All of these guys, the largest collections are either in New York or in Japan.
Yeah.
Okay. I think the problem has always been that in India, art was always seen as something that was a decorative thing that you would put, and if it didn't cotton onto you, you didn't see value in it.
Correct.
Okay. So how do you value a master? That is a tough question, because, one is, obviously, there is a lot of hype around it. But I think part of it really is, even interestingly, by the way, none of your wealth managers in India promote art as an alternative investment.
Correct.
My sister, who's a big collector of art, bought a piece in I think 1999 for 10,000 rupees or something, and sold it 10, 12 years later for about 1.5 crores.
Correct.
Now, the point is that
since you're talking, let me give you an interesting story. About 10, 12 years ago, the chairman of a large nationalized bank had come over to my house for dinner. And he was walking around in my house looking at all our art. And he says, Mr. Garg, the value of your art is bigger than the value of your house.
Yeah, of course.
So the next time I want a loan, will you take my art as collateral? He said no.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because they don't understand the value of it.
Right.
And the thing is that it's a transient value. But having said that, if you look at ITC's art collection, the art collection that was done by the Tatas, if you go to TIFR, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, they have a magnificent collection in the gallery. Now it's I think there are some of the older generation of entrepreneurs or corporates. Air India used to have a massively fantastic collection of art. The Birlas have a great collection of art. So there are pockets what I see as art collectors.
And yet the new trend seems to be to rent art.
Yes. That I have not understood. Either you love a piece and you keep it, okay, and you see its value appreciate both in terms of the joy that you get of seeing it every day and monetary value. Renting art is like saying, okay, today I like this fashion and therefore I shall do it and all stuff. Okay, it may be the thing, but it's not my cup of tea.
So one more question to you, Ravi. For a lot of the young people who will listen to you and me talking, how does a young person start collecting art? I mean, most good art as people perceive it is beyond my reach.
Yeah. So here's the challenge. There are two types of collectors that I see. One is people who look at something and say, I love it. I don't care what it, and it doesn't, it doesn't, what it doesn't, The second set of collectors are people who constantly looking out for new things. Okay, so I've had a couple of people who bought my pieces who said, we are not buying this because there is a value attached to it.
Correct.
We're buying it because we love it and we want to put it up in our room. And I would just suggest that for younger people, I think that's a better model. Go buy something that you really enjoy seeing.
Correct.
That will add value to your home. And if you're lucky, 10 years from now, it might be worth $1 million.
Well,
if you're not, it's fine. I mean, there are so many things that you get in life that are purely for your own enjoyment.
For your own pleasure. I agree. And that resonates exactly what my thinking has been for 40 years. So.
It's interesting. Somebody mentioned to me yesterday saying that, you'll buy an expensive car, which within 3 years will depreciate to 40% of its value.
Correct.
Or less. Okay. But you won't buy a piece of art that might appreciate to 50, 60, 100% of its value, 5 years from now.
Very true. Very true.
And it's going to cost you much less than buying a new fancy car.
Very true. Well said. So I'm going to move to the next section of our chat, which is some questions for you personally.
Yeah, sure.
My first question is, as an artist, where do you draw your inspiration?
Everywhere. I mean, I read, whether it comes from reading, from sometimes a news clip. I did a series on the Mahabharata, but interpreted it in my own way. But to make a series on the Mahabharata, you have to actually read those sections to understand, how did Dronacharya die and how did and to conceptualize it. I think part of it comes from the background of the journey, the conversations that you've had. So a lot of it comes from art, from other art. So when you see a painting and you say, how do I translate this in my own way of thinking about it? Okay. So if you go to my website, you will be able to see a series of things from different places. I get it from, things like, simple things like, how do you twist a normal thing? That's the whole point of surrealism is, how do you twist a normal thing and make it in such a way that it's still recognizable, but you don't recognize the form. So that comes from that. I made a whole series I was listening to Penny Lane by the Beatles. And, there's a very, very nice line in that Baba sees, Penny Lane, there's a Baba looking at the photographs of all the heads that he has known. And it just struck me that, everybody who's doing some job really wants to do something else.
Correct.
So there's this whole series I made, which is that if you had $1 million or $10 million, would you be doing what you're doing?
Amazing. Okay.
So as part of my, I still do a little bit of consulting work. I sometimes deal with, board members or senior executives. And I ask them this, is that, are you doing this because you are getting paid or are you doing this because you're passionate about it?
Correct.
And it's an unfortunate thing but that's the reality of our lives, is that 97 to 98% will say, yeah, I like what I'm doing. It's not that I don't like it. But if I had 100 crore rupees, I would be doing something completely different.
And yet I have asked this question from many of my friends that if you were to add one more zero to your net worth, will it change your life?
Yeah.
And not even one person has said it will.
Yeah, of course. So it's an interesting dichotomy because, most people will actually enjoy what they're doing. I mean, otherwise you don't really stay.
Correct.
I don't think people leave jobs because they don't like the bosses. I mean, that's the normal thinking. I think they leave jobs because they eventually get bored of what they're doing.
Correct.
But
wonderful.
Having the financial freedom gives you wings. I mean, and that's the reality. So,
So that takes me to the next question. Yeah, what does success mean to Ravi Trivedi?
Okay, so that's an interesting point because I think in different periods of your life, success means different things.
I agree. But what does it mean to you today?
So if you had asked me this question 30 years ago when I started my career, I would say success meant getting your project done. The very much transactional view of success.
Absolutely. More money, bigger role.
Yeah, bigger role. Can I do this successfully? Recognition. Yeah. Can I get stock options? All that stuff. Once I became partner and I started getting to a point where, some of those, it's like that Maslow's hierarchy.
Correct.
I got to a point where I said, okay, success now means can I groom some other people to do better things?
Correct.
Move to a slightly more coaching view of success. So in KPMG, I had 5 members of my team who became partners, and that was success to me at that point of time. I have, in a way, gone back a little bit to more transactional view of success now that I'm in my art, which is when I'm making a piece, when I'm thinking about it and translating it into a piece of art, did I make it well? Did I, achieve what I was trying to do? Did I enjoy the process of making it? Interestingly, I have absolutely no emotional connect to my piece once it's done.
Okay,
it's done. His history, I liked it, and I love the process of making it. And I love after I have conceived it and thought about it, and some of these require engineering because they're balanced, and therefore I need to make sure that the tension is right and all the stuff. So to me, that I've gone back a little bit to the transactional view of success, which is much more instantaneous. But I also look at success in a slightly different way, which is, it's like when I was very happy with the outcome of the 2 auctions that we did, because to me that meant that, in my own small way, I've been able to contribute to some other people. And that is success. Yeah. So my wife says that you've reached that 5th stage, which is self-actualization. In a way, being humble about it, I think I have, I don't get phased out. I'm happy with,
Fair enough. So, but time for my last question to you now.
Please.
And that is that if you, Ravi, were followed by millions of children who closely looked at your life choices, what is the one thing you would change in yourself?
That's an interesting one. I thought you were going to ask me what would you tell them as advice. I would tell first would be advice. I know advice really would be take risks. Because that's the way to make it work.
But I want to know what would you change in yourself?
I would think I would learn some of these things about what I talked about success a little earlier. There's that famous thing which says, "This too shall pass."
Yeah.
We tend to spend so much time in our lives worrying about little things. Did this go well? Did this not go well? Will this happen? Will this not happen? And in the end, you realize at the end of the 5 years, it didn't really matter at all. And I really wish that kids are taught some amount of that philosophy earlier in their lives in school and in college. That look, there'll be ups and downs, and things will process. Yeah, life doesn't end because your project didn't go well.
Absolutely right.
There is always another morning, and there's always another thing to do, and live with it, and this too shall pass. And I think that line to me is such a strong line.
ये भी गुजर जाएगा.
Absolutely, ये भी exactly. कुछ दुनिया चलती रही है. It's been around for billions of years,
and it will
continue, whether you're there or not.
Well said. Ravi, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward to getting one of your pieces in my collection. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.